All right.
All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Well, my guest today is probably the most popular guest we have on the show based on the number of questions that have been submitted. You know, guys, whenever we have a doctor on the show, especially this doctor, we really can't take questions from the chat. They disappear too quickly. So all you have to do is go to chefaj.com, subscribe for my newsletter. We basically send out an email once a week telling you who the guests are for the entire week, and then you respond to the email. And we got 18 responses, so we'll see what we can do with them. Please welcome Dr. Doug Lisle. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, it's great, AJ, every time.
Yeah, you know, it's so funny, Dr. Lisle. I always think, nobody's going to have any questions. What could people ask? And then we get 18 questions. And actually, when I look at the first three that came in, they are things that at least on my show you haven't discussed. So I can't wait to hear your response.
All right.
Okay, so the first question is from Gary. Dr. Lisle, can you please give me some advice for interacting with those who are terminally ill? I have two people in my life right now, a friend and a relative that have terminal cancer, and I've been avoiding visiting them because I don't know what to say to a person who is dying.
I think that I'm not. I mean, it's such a broad question because every single human relationship between any two people is unique, and so I don't know how you feel about those people. So I don't know what your pattern of interaction has been. I think it's common for people to avoid people obviously that aren't super close to them, just because it's people are afraid of that very thing. Eventually, I mean, the thing to do is you just go, if they've got any significance in your life, then you visit. And you may not visit for a long time, but one of the things that's well established is that people have an avoidance of physical contact with people that have cancer, for example. And there's a low grade feeling of possibly contagion that is a little bit bizarre. And so they find that a lot of cancer patients really feel like they're being essentially rejected and isolated. So it's important to know that you may have a little low grade anxiety about that, and that we want to be physically affectionate with these people to the extent that it's consistent at all with your history with them. And in fact, even if you haven't been, you might ask them if you can give them a hug. Okay, so and if they say sure, then and they may say, I don't know, I feel too this or that, then fine. But have them be the barrier there, not you. So those are the things that I would be thinking about. And you got to ask them, hey, how they're feeling, how their treatment seems to be going, and then ask them about other things in their life that are related, about their children or their spouse or their dog. In other words, they've got other components to their life that you can ask them about, and that's what you're going to do. And you can also be telling them things that are going on in your life. Okay, just as if their life probably is going to go on for a while. Even if they've got a terminal cancer, we don't know how long they're going to live, but they could live 6 months, they could live 2 years. There's a lot for them to be thinking about, and they're still interested in life. So that's what you would do. But those are a few of the things. The responses that you're having are consistent with people that aren't too close to you, but are close enough to be of the significant nose count that would go on at a family gathering, for example. And that you are afraid of it for all these tiny little reasons. It's not just the contagion reason. It's also the reason of, what am I going to say? This is this catastrophic thing. So if we want to be a good friend, And you can also ask them, hey, I want to be a good friend to you. Is there anything I can do for you? Okay, so these are the things that we do. I mean, we're all terminal, and none of us knows how long any of us are going to live. And so the truth of the matter is that we approach this thing called life with some degree of a solemn attitude towards the fact that it's finite, and that this hour that we're going to spend with them is meant to have some meaning to it. And if the meaning is that I'm signaling to you that you're important and what can I do for you and can I give you a hug, that's a good job.
Wow. So we're all terminal.
Yeah, we're all terminal. Yeah.
That's one way to look at it. Thank you, Dr. Lisle. So this next question actually was from last month, and I apologize to the doctor. I did not ask it. And she is a medical doctor, an OBGYN. And she says she is an OBGYN that has a particularly morbidly obese population where she works, of a BMI of 40 to 50, and they gain excessive weight during their pregnancies, like 70 pounds. She says that this actually affects both the maternal and fetal health. She wants to know, how do I address the excessive monthly weight gain without upsetting the patients? Because she said, if you need some background information, she works for an HMO. And when she does address it, even in the most respectful way, they file a complaint against her that she was rude or body shaming, because most of the other doctors are just afraid to discuss weight at all.
Yeah, I think what I would do to try to help these people is, you're not going to discuss weight. You're going to discuss how that there's a lot of nutrients and good nutrition, and for your microbiome health, to eat a lot of wet starches. So that's all you're going to do. You're going to attack this from my talk, Getting Along Without Going Along, has the fourth strategy, and the same strategy is what I call the Andrew Weil. And the Andrew Weil is that we talk all about all the nutrients and vitamins and minerals and antioxidants that are in natural food. We don't talk about getting rid of all the crap that people eat. We talk about what we should be putting in. So that's the only, keep in mind that it is exceedingly unlikely that anything that you will say to any patient in the next year will make 1% of difference in their behavior. So, but you may feel a moral responsibility that you want to at least cover this to some extent with every single patient, so that your hands are morally clean. And so the way we do this is we use the Andrew Weil side of it. So the Andrew Weil is, one thing that's a really good idea when you're expecting is to make sure that your child is going to get a lot of antioxidants and that sort of vitamins and minerals in their natural form. And so the best way to do that are things like potatoes, rice, beans, and then any fruit that you like, or God forbid, vegetables. We all know that. Okay. But the big thing that people generally don't understand is that rice, beans, and potatoes, things like that, are really good for you. Okay. Oh, well, I heard that those starches are bad, or that that those carbs are bad. It's like, well, no, that's where you heard wrong. That's why I'm a doctor. And so when you've heard that, you've heard mistakenly. The rice, beans, and potatoes are exactly what the traditional people around the world have always eaten. It's what women have eaten a lot of when they're hungry during pregnancy. And and those foods are full of antioxidants and vitamins and minerals that your baby needs. So the more of those you're willing to eat, the better off you're going to be. That's how I would do it. And I wouldn't say one word about weight. They say, oh, it'll help cause me to gain more weight. You say, nope, it actually won't. They have less calorie density than richer foods. So they are, they have a lot of fiber and water in them, and which is exactly what we want to have you eating, is fiber and water and vitamins and minerals, which is basically what the rice, don't say starches because people hate that word. It's rice, beans, and potatoes. Those kinds of things, in any way that you can eat those are good. And then they'll go eat bags and bags of potato chips.
I can tell you that the doctor that asked this question is not only plant-based herself, but a very, very conscientious person.
Right. And so that's what's bothering her. Yeah, don't mention the word weight loss. It's all about natural food. It's all about natural food to get nutrients. That's how we're going to sell that.
Thank you. That's a very interesting perspective. I don't know if you heard on CNN or other sources that they have these cards that patients can bring to the doctor's office saying, you cannot weigh me unless I give my informed consent, because that is shaming me. And there are some medical specialties where weight actually is important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, pretty soon you're not going to be able to say anything to anybody without getting sued. So, but in this case, yeah, just keep it on the things that they need to add to their diet, not anything that they need to subtract. That's the only hope you've got anyway.
Thank you. This is from Clarissa. Any advice for adults with narcissistic parents? Through my reading and research, this seems to apply to my mother and explains a lot about why it's always been so hard for me to feel good about myself. And maybe you could explain what narcissism is, because I think you have a little bit different definition.
Yeah, the narcissism was a term that was invented by Sigmund Freud in the early 1900s to describe people that are very selfish and have a selfish and arrogance, etc. But Freud would not have had a clue as to why it happens or what its fundamental structure is psychologically. 100 years later, we know, but the word and the term are now officially buried into the nomenclature of psychology and psychiatry and even the modern outside world. It doesn't make any sense to talk about it, even though I will use that term from time to time because I know it, because I've been immersed in the terminology for 4 decades. The correct term is disagreeable. There is nothing in a human being that is, quote, narcissistic, that is anything other than just disagreeable. It's agreeable, disagreeable dimension. So people differ in terms of how agreeable and disagreeable they are on a bell curve. And so, most people are somewhere near the 50th percentile. And if you're Alan Goldhammer, you're more towards the high end of disagreeable. That's who you are. So in principle, there would somebody out there, if you would interview him long enough, some psychologist or psychiatrist would say Alan Goldhammer is narcissistic, because they would pick up features of his disagreeable personality. But actually, if you interact with Alan, he doesn't pick him up as narcissistic at all. You pick him up as very, very confident, okay, and very resolute. In other words, he's confident that he's right, and he's very resolute. But he doesn't have some of the other characteristics that people would be narcissistic. People are often called narcissistic when they are both disagreeable and they're kind of emotionally unstable. So now they're yelling about how it is that they need a better table in the restaurant because this is completely unfair and unacceptable. Now that starts looking like our classic narcissist, okay? So, but the truth is that there is no, quote, narcissism. It's just disagreeable. That's what it is. So your parents may be disagreeable. And what we want to do with people in our lives that are significant people in our lives that are disagreeable is we want to operate our lives from a distance to them. So all relationships are literally overlaps of time and energy exchange process. That's what they are. That if you're not overlapping with an individual's life in terms of time and energy expended on something, then you don't have a relationship with them at all. Okay. So that's what relationships involve, is exchange processes of time and energy. So what we want to do with disagreeable people is we want to minimize that overlap. Okay, so this is what I call the disagreeable distance. So you want to, sometimes you literally, if it's your mother and she lives around the block from you, you need to move, you know what I mean? So literally sometimes we need to put physical distance between ourselves and some people that are very significant in our lives and are actually just too much of an octopus. They've got their finger in too much of your business. So that sometimes happens. But if it's a parent and you're not living on top of them in terms geographically, then all we need to do is to impose the disagreeable distance with respect to communication. Okay. And so we can do that. And so you can do that by saying, hey, listen, let me, I've just got a very hectic schedule. Let me just call you once a week. I'll call you on Saturday morning. And then we call them on Saturday morning. We chat with them for 15 minutes. And then we say, hey, I got to go for my hike. Done. That's what we do. So in other words, we find a way to morph our relationship into a process that makes sense for us. And if they bitch and whine about it, just blame Big Louie. Hey, I'm just busy. I got just too many things going on. And we eventually make it so that the relationship triangulates on an overlap that works for us. So that's it. And if they get pissy and difficult about it, then call me up and I will give you the specifics on how to deal with that specific human.
I actually told the person to do that, actually,
Yeah.
when I saw the question. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. This is an interesting question from Renata. She says, Dr. Lisle, I'm a 35-year-old female, and I'm interested in becoming a single mother by choice via a sperm donor.
Mm-hmm.
I always wanted to be a mother, and I'm certain that I won't find a suitable partner before my biological clock runs out. However, from listening to your Beat Your Genes podcasts, I've learned that personality is largely genetic, and therefore I am wary of having a child with a man I've never met and don't know, the sperm donor. I'm afraid that since I don't know the father, the child could be very low conscientious, very emotionally unstable, or aggressive. I don't know if I could handle these issues as a single mom. I also don't know what the consequences are of raising a child without a father. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, really good question. And probably if you want to go to sperm banks that are going to give you a lot of information on the personality of the donor. Okay, so that is a big deal. And so if they don't give you, if and God knows you would want to go to a place that has a reputation for very high integrity about that kind of an issue. So and if they don't give you information on the sperm donor, then absolutely don't do it. In other words, that person, just think about what exquisite and important preferences you have when it comes to mating. You're like, nah, that guy's too little too this, ooh, he's a little too that. No, too big, too small, too fat, too thin, too tall, too short, too broke. I guess you can't be too rich or too thin, but no, you probably can be. You can be too thin as a male, but you probably can't be too rich. But you can certainly be too loud. You can chew with your mouth open. You can be disagreeable. You can have too many tattoos. You can pick too many fights. You can be too argumentative. You could be too cheap with the waitresses. Why do you think you're so picky in mating and that you're 35 years old and you haven't got a partner? Answer: because you're really fussy. Why? You're really fussy because your genetic code is demanding that you get somebody really good to do what? Father your child. Okay, so you can actually see what's going on here. You are actually, your whole life has been nothing other than trying to pick a sperm donor. That's what it's all about. That's what romance and love is. Okay, so it's no surprise that that now we find out way deep into the game that the personality and the looks and the intelligence of your offspring are absolutely and utterly dependent upon the genetic combination. So so of course you should be extremely concerned about that, and so unless you can find a donor, a donor place that gives you that kind of information, then don't do it. Okay, so that's what I would tell you. And what was the other thing that you wanted to know?
I think it was all in the, okay, let me go back to it. Sorry.
Some of the questions at the end.
Well, she wanted to know, she said that she didn't think she'd be able to handle these issues as a single mom. What were the consequences of raising a child without a father are?
None. There are no consequences. Okay, so child does not need a father for anything. The notion that they need a role model is complete BS. So this is just classic psychodynamic ignorance. There is no need for a father whatsoever other than to give the mom a break. okay, and to protect and provide for a mom that would have been extremely useful in the Stone Age environment and increase the likelihood of the child surviving. But you don't have that problem now. So, nope, you single moms are 100% competent at raising children. Children are little biological replicatory devices that will go through series of growth stages that are natural to the species, and they don't need a man around for any of it. So neither do they need a mom. They don't need a mom or a dad. A kid is just fine being raised by his dad. Never needs to have a mother in their life. And
Do they need any parent? I mean,
yeah. In other words, they need somebody to feed them, and their emotional life is a hell of a lot better if they have a consistent feedback that people care. But the notion of the John Bowlby studies in orphanages, just where kids weren't touched for 3 months, yeah, there's a very decent possibility that if you went through that kind of incredible deprivation, there might be some impact. Probably not. Those studies were not well done, and the reason why those children weren't interacting with anybody was probably because they had very odd characteristics even as infants. So the truth of the matter is that all a child needs is basic survival apparatus, and that child will develop into the personality that it was designed to be. So that's how that goes. But anyway, this lady, whoever it is going to be an extremely competent parent, easily capable of providing for that child everything that it needs. But make sure that if you're going to build a house, which is what's going to happen, make sure that you've got good materials. And that's the materials or the genetic code on the other side.
Well, one of the viewers is upset to hear you say that a child has no need for a father.
Nope, not at all. I mean, they can be upset, but this is the sort of shocking thing about human nature that nobody knew, and became first evident in the mid-1980s with the monozygotic twin studies, and now has been confirmed in the last 35 years of research. Children are incredibly resilient to trauma and to abandonment and to everything else. And so they are survival and reproduction machines. They are incredibly resilient. And so the fact that their feelings aren't so resilient, in other words, you can have, you could sprain your ankle and cry, and you can not make the cut on the 7th grade basketball team and cry. You can go through difficult experiences when you're getting bad feedback, but it's not going to impact your adult functioning. This is extremely important to understand. So no, a child absolutely does not need a father for anything.
Well, she's saying that there's so much research proving young men without fathers are responsible for much of the violence in our society today. Nearly every single school shooting is a fatherless male. Is that true?
Yeah. Okay. So but she's not understanding what she's looking at. So it's going to turn out that the children that come from homes where the father has not been present, why is that true? That's because the father is a flake and an irresponsible human being, and the woman who mated with that person is characteristic of making very poor mating choices. If we also when we see those things, we're looking at the genetic code. Okay, so that's what's happening. So if you looked at the IQ and you looked at the personalities of people who come from mothers who are single mothers, you're going to find that the IQs are vastly lower. I don't mean a little bit. I mean vastly lower. The average IQ of the average child from a single mother is going to be at least 30 to 40 percentile lower than the average child that comes from a family that's intact. That's not causal. In other words, the lack of a father doesn't cause the low IQ. It's a derivative of the fact of the people that live their lives that way have much lower intelligence, much less stability, and much less conscientiousness. So this is what we call C-no genes research. This is precisely exactly what you see in the adverse childhood events inventories that have been promulgated by the World Health Organization. the notion that early childhood events of trauma cause damage. They do not. Okay. So when you control for monozygotic twin studies raised apart, one child which goes through all kinds of traumatic experiences, another one that doesn't, you find no differences in adult functioning between those two. Okay. So all you're looking at is people that come from genes that are inherently unstable and low functioning, and then they will do unstable, low functioning things. Okay. So that's how that works. So understandable mistake. In fact, what this lady is talking about is one of the great catastrophic mistakes of causality in the history of the world. So the social sciences are now awash in a misunderstanding of why it is that things work the way they work. They're thinking that the reason why children are unstable and dangerous and violent has to do with the fact that they came from unstable, dangerous, and violent environments. That is not true. Okay, they had genes that were unstable and violent, and that is why you are seeing what you see. This is an amazing truth, and it is very disturbing truth, and it also has enormous implications for how it is that one might manage these problems on a societal level. And the solutions are not what is in place now. Okay, so such is life. But no, I understand why this is upsetting for people, because it's very politically incorrect, but it is nevertheless the truth.
Well, a couple of people are saying you're the only professional that says this.
Yeah, I'm not. Okay, so if you pick up work by Robert Plomin, so pick up the modern Bible of behavior genetics by the world's most famous behavior geneticist. And behavior genetics is the study of individual differences in humans. You will find that the great professor says basically just what I'm saying. Not quite. Why? Because he's the Pope of personality, and the Pope needs to know how to talk in a way that doesn't upset everybody. Okay, so I'm not the Pope, so I can use a little bit more plain English. But if you read Blueprint, this is exactly what you'll see.
Yeah, thank you. People are saying, what are your thoughts on same-sex couples raising adopted children?
No problem at all. Okay, so this is what counts is the lovingness of the personalities and how pleasant the child's life experience is. The child doesn't learn its sexuality from its environment, and it's not going to influence its personality in any way whatsoever. Okay, so if I was raised by two uncles that had been gay, it would not have influenced anything about my sexuality at all, and my life experience, my future, in other words, my adult personality, would not have been impacted in the slightest. The only thing that would have been impacted would have been the years that I was with them. Did I have a good time and was it pleasant, or did I have a terrible time because I didn't get along with them? In other words, what you have control over, people, is the quality of the life experience that the person lives while they're under your wing. So you have an influence on their life experience as in their growing up process. You will not influence their adulthood. Their adulthood will be their adulthood. They will choose those paths for themselves according to their nature.
Great, thank you. Okay. So now that we've set a lot of people, we'll move forward with a different topic. Yeah, I know. People are like, I'm done here. But see, this is the thing. I think whether I agree with you or not, I think people should be allowed to express their opinion on Chef AJ Live.
Sure.
That's my feeling. So anyway, so I have a question here from an anonymous 35-year-old female that I apologize to you, forgot to ask last month. Mm-hmm. I have been struggling with an unusual problem for decades, and I hope I can finally get some help. I'm a 35-year-old female, and I am afraid to talk to men. I've been avoiding all interaction with males for decades. I never go to male doctors or male dentists. I never talk to male salespeople. I do my best to avoid any interaction with men throughout undergrad and grad school. However, if by chance my avoidance is unsuccessful and a man would manage to talk to me, I get really nervous, can't talk, look away, walk away. They probably think I'm being rude, but in reality, I'm just paralyzed by my nervousness. This happens with all men, not just men I'm attracted to, although it is worse with men I'm attracted to. I have no problem talking to and building relationships with females. I've never been raped or abused. I have good relationships with the males in my family. I'm now 35 years old and have never even had a normal conversation with a man, much less a date. How do I overcome this?
Yeah, this person's 1 in a million. And so this is a bizarre personality. This is really out there. I would say there is no overcoming it. This is genetic. So this is I think that the most useful thing that I can imagine would be to possibly you would want. What do I really think about this? What we would have to do is we would begin with the end in mind, and we would say, okay, what is it that why would you want to interact with men at all? In other words, what upside would there be for you? In other words, what sort of relationship might you be seeking? And so if you're not going to be friends with men, which you probably won't be, and you can work for the people in the world, you can maneuver your way and just work for females if you want to. So there wouldn't be any necessarily reason why you would need to interact with males for any reason. There's plenty of women doctors in the world, plenty of women accountants. So I would actually ask the question, what is it that you might be seeking? Okay. So if you might be seeking the fact that you comment that you find some men attractive, so you might be seeking relationships, a romantic relationship per se, possibly. It sounds like that's pretty unlikely, but let's suppose that you were. Then you would have to essentially structure a way for you to actually meet somebody that might be interested in a relationship. And we would have to orchestrate that. We would have to script it in a way that maybe you could tolerate. If you can't, in other words, and there might be stepping stones that we would do. You can write to me. There's a psychologist that specializes in anxiety, basically pretty serious anxiety disorders that I don't want to give out her name here because I don't want her getting 80 phone calls. But if you'll write to me, I will direct her specific name to you and you can contact her and see whether or not she could consult with you. But from the sound of it, I'm not sure I believe this person's rendition of what it is that they are expressing. I'm not saying that I don't. I'm just saying that is literally a 1 in a million description of a life experience. I have never heard anything like that. Okay, so I've never heard anything even remotely like that. So let's suppose that it's true. If that's actually true and you're 35 years old, I doubt very seriously where there's any therapeutic process that's going to alter this significantly at all. However, if there were such a process, it would be in the hands of an expert, and so that's probably what one would need to do.
Thank you.
Okay.
Believe it or not, we have 3 questions on fruit and whether it makes a person fat. I'm probably going to have to get to all of them because they're slightly different, but the first one is from Andrea. She says, Dr. Lisle, is it possible for a food like grapes to be a trigger food or keep extra weight on? I find myself eating an entire bag of grapes until I am uncomfortably full.
Yeah, you're not going to overeat on grapes. So not a chance. So even if you're uncomfortably full, maybe you could put 2 pounds of grapes in your stomach. It'd be pretty hard to do that, but you might be able to do it. And it's going to be 600 calories of raw food, which so no, just the satiety exchange for the amount of cubic centimeters of food in your stomach relative to what that does to your satiety level. This is effectiveness of the satiety mechanisms to monitor the calorie intake is very good. It gets poorer and poorer as you process the food and make the food very, very concentrated. Then that machinery starts to be unable to read the calorie density of the food. But grapes, it's always going to be able to read. So the fact that you may love it and wolf down a whole bunch of it, that just means that every calorie of those 600 calories will be effectively cataloged, which means that it will be, you will not be accidentally overeating calories. And so those calories will be cataloged effectively by the hypothalamus. And even if you ate a lot of food, it just means it's going to be a longer time between now and when you eat next. Okay. So keep in mind, people have a simplistic and misunderstanding of food and satiety and how it works. So people will say, yeah, I know I've heard you talk about satiety, but I just know I overate. It's like, folks, there's no such thing as eating the right amount of food. That is a biological impossibility. It's a question that doesn't make any sense at all. The only thing that makes sense is over a period of time, it's right. So let's suppose that you walked over to the kitchen. Your respiration is going to go up a little bit. Okay, if we watched you very carefully, and if you were sitting calmly, not watching an exciting movie, or were just meditating, we would find that over the course of 2 minutes, we would find that there was 17 respirations. And then when you got up and then you went to the kitchen, we would find at some point your respiration would start to increase for a few seconds. So the question is, is it overdoing it? Well, what do you mean overdoing it? It's compensating for where it was before and where it is now. Okay. And so then it's gonna escalate a little bit and then it's gonna come down. Well, was it too much then? Is it too little now? It's like, it doesn't make any sense at all. It's like saying, well, is the temperature okay? Well, I don't know. Right now, with my hands exposed in this room, it's a little bit cool. My hands are a tiny bit cool, but the rest of my body isn't. So is it too cold? Should I put gloves on? In other words, the perfection or perfect homeostasis with respect to the environment is an impossibility. All you have is compensatory mechanisms that tell you when it starts to get too far out of line one way or the other. And then it motivates behavior to move it back towards a direction of biological optimization. So if you quote, eat a hell of a lot of grapes, that's not a problem. It just means that instead of being hungry 4 hours from now, you're going to be hungry 4.5 hours from now, the same amount of hunger. Okay. In other words, the hunger drive will arise a little bit later than it would have had you only eaten a pound of grapes or 1.5 pounds of grapes. Now, literally 3 more grapes will make a difference as to when exactly it starts occurring to you that you're how hungry. So that's all. So over a period of time, on an average basis over a month, if you eat whole natural foods, your intake is going to be exquisitely accurate relative to the energy that's expended. But in any given moment, you're going to be too much, too little for, quote, that optimum. Not a problem. I mean, there's going to be times when I'm in a hurry and I want something to eat because I'm going to be on camera for the next hour and a half, and I don't eat as much as I wanted to. Well, did I eat too little? Well, what do you mean too little for what? Well, I'm still a little bit hungry. So that means when I'm done with whatever it is that I'm doing, then I'll eat a little bit more than I would have had I eaten more earlier. That's all. So yeah, don't worry about overeating grapes. It's not going to happen.
Thank you. All righty. Oh, I just want to tell you that there are people, though, that are supporting you and agreeing with you. And one of them said that she is an adoption specialist and she does adoptions, and she agrees with you about ACEs.
Yeah, just a comment. This is a very the way I talk can make me sound like someone who is insensitive to child abuse, who's insensitive to The fact that children might miss out on playing catch with their dad, and that was a really important experience for them. So it would be terrible to not have a father. It's like, hey, and some kid that doesn't have a father, when they go to, back to school night, and their mom has taken them and they don't have a dad and everybody else has a dad, that's an uncomfortable, embarrassing, and slightly rejecting feeling. And that can be an unpleasant process for children to go through. So nothing about this, but what I'm saying here is meant to be insensitive. What it's meant to be is accurate about the most important questions that people are asking, like, why did some kids shoot up a school? And why does it seem to be children of single moms that are shooting up schools as opposed to kids that aren't? And it's not because the kid lacked a father in his development that resulted in the instability of that personality. That is extremely important to actually understand the truth, okay? So all of the other ancillary issues about life enjoyment and the embarrassments and this and security feelings, all of those things are important parts of the life experience. And I wouldn't want to ignore those in the same way that, for example, saying, oh, you don't need a mother. Of course you don't need a mother, for God's sakes. But to say that, in many circles in psychology today, it would be scandalous. And to say that in 1960 would have been arrogant and to the point of an extraordinary position that was flying in the face of everything that psychology knew. In other words, both learning theory or a dynamic theory, both of them would have been thinking, oh, well, a lot of important things are learned in interaction with your mom and blah, blah, blah. Okay. Well, it turns out that none of that is true. And so there would have been no way for anybody to know what it is that I know, 50 years ago. Would have been impossible. So, but, fortunately, that's how science comes across startling things that we didn't know. We didn't know that the Earth was made up of a bunch of chemical elements. Nobody knew that. So all kinds of things that people didn't know. They didn't know that, time and speed are interrelated, and E equals MC squared. Who the hell knew that? Nobody knew that, okay? Well, nobody knew how important individual differences in genetics would be for determining personality and intelligence, and of course, looks, for God's sakes. Like, we all knew that somehow. But if you turn out and you look through the lens of human preferences, we find out that people are exquisitely rating and analyzing and assessing and intuiting their mates. Why is that so important? And the answer is, your ancestors had innate genetic knowledge that the genes were critically important in offspring. Okay, that is exactly what it is. It is the ultimate in eugenics. It's the notion of, whoa, I'm picking my mate super carefully. I would be with Jim, who's a really good guy, and he's solid and he's decent looking and he's a nice guy, but there's just no excitement there. I can't marry him. Peter over there is just way more cool, and I really feel drawn to him, and we have great chemistry. Well, what do you think that is? Okay. What that is your own personal eugenics program. You are attempting to get some secret cool sauce inside your children to help them in their journey for finding mates and reproducing later. That's what it is. And so those decisions are being very carefully orchestrated by the genetic code in the service of the genetic code. So modern psychology until recently had no idea that was taking place. None. Okay, so all of the people that are making contrarian arguments, that are not aware of this revolution, are understandably upset, because parts of this argument can sound very unfriendly. I'm actually not unfriendly at all. I'm very sensitive to people's vicissitudes of their life, no matter what age they are and what the process is. But what I'm trying to help people understand is the truth. And for example, this woman asking this question, wanting to know about sperm donors and how important it is, what happens in this life. And the answer is, what's important is the genes of the donor, and don't worry about your kid. Your kid will be fine as long as the genes are fine. And if the genes are terrible, it doesn't matter if you have Prince Charming be the stepfather of that child and you have a perfect Norman Rockwell situation. If that kid has hell on wheel genes, that kid's going to be hell on wheels and it's going to have a hell on wheels life. That was completely not understood by Freudian psychology or by learning theory. The two twin towers of 20th century psychology got it wrong. Okay. And I didn't get it right till I was a young professor of personality at Stanford University, which led me to have to investigate this science very carefully in order to teach my students what the emerging truth was. And so that was 30 years ago. 30 years later, the opinions that I have then are firmer now because the evidence is firmer. And now, if you want to examine that evidence, pick up Blueprint by Robert Plomin and see if you can understand the depth. This is like Colin Campbell suspecting 30 years ago that milk wasn't such a good idea and starting his investigations. 30 years later, he's like, hey, I know exactly what the deal is. Okay, down to the level of a bunch of the microbiology of cancergenesis. Colin didn't know that when he was 30. Okay, and the field of science of nutritional biochemistry did not know that. Now it knows it. Okay, and now we know the roots of the human personality. All right.
Well, it's so funny that we're having this conversation now because I literally just finished watching the Jeffrey Dahmer show, and it's like, well,
yes, there you go.
How about them genes, huh?
How about them genes?
Yep. Okay, so switching gears for a bit. This is from Randy. Dr. Lisle, how involved do you get into a daughter and son-in-law's marriage? After 14 years of them dating from age 17 and getting married, no children, my daughter out of the clear blue is calling it quits. We all love the son-in-law. He was shocked. He came over to talk to me if I have any insight. I have no clue. My family was shocked also. I feel sorry for my son-in-law. They live out of state. My daughter is just saying they are just best friends and no romantic like things she sees on social media. My sister-in-law would like them to do counseling. I suggested that he go and even refer you, even if she won't attend.
She's the one that might need me, not him. So let me explain a few things about relationships. Our relationships today sit inside of financial matrices that are inconsistent with the natural history of the species. So 10,000 years ago, if you were in an African tribe or in a Chinese tribe, or you were a Native American tribe or a European tribe in Scotland, it was important to have a father around that was helping protect and provide for offspring, but it wasn't essential. And it turns out that what counts is that you have a man in your teepee because he's a member of the hunting party, and therefore you get a share of the success of the hunt. That's why a woman needed a man more than anything. The child is actually protected quite well by the village and by the other women that you're super connected to, etc. What am I saying here? I'm saying that people broke up all the time, and it was not a financial catastrophe at all. And so there wasn't any money, there wasn't any wealth, there wasn't any 401k, none of that existed. So that when people became sexually disinterested in each other, they simply moved on. That's what happened. And there was feelings, they have feelings of attachment and so on and so forth. But the truth is that it wasn't a legal financial catastrophe and 8.0 Richter scale earthquake that it is today. Okay. We have that today as a result of the entire nature of civilization and the fact that civilization has allowed human beings to accumulate wealth, which is unknown in the Stone Age. It's not natural to the species. It is incredibly useful to be born into a world where San Francisco and Los Angeles and freeways and cars already exist. Okay, so you don't have to build where the office that you're going to work in from scratch every new generation. We get to just go take advantage of incredible infrastructure and square footage and equipment and knowledge that's already been accumulated by previous generations. It's an extraordinary advantage in our life. The problem with that is that modern life then is going to require that you get some of it in order to have the blessings of civilization. You can go live under a bridge with your family if you want, and you can, steal almonds from somebody's grove and then drink out of the river. You can survive, etc. But the point is that's no way to live. And so as a result of this, money, and in certain places you can't do that, because if you're born in the middle of Los Angeles, there isn't any wild place for you to go to and to pick berries and survive. So we are dependent upon financial systems now in a way that our ancestors were not, which means there is a tremendous disruption that comes with breaking up a family that never existed in the Stone Age. And so as a result, essentially, and when it was more important financially than it is today. So in 1948 in the United States, women, everybody's making minimum wage. Most people were making minimum wage as late as 1970 in this country. That's hard for us to believe today, but that is the way it was. So the country was vastly poorer, and therefore a divorce was basically not affordable. The divorce was what happened at the low end of the financial scale. There was a catastrophe for children literally being in deprived circumstances and hungry. And it happened at the high scale with people that could afford it. So in a famous phrase by John Paul Getty, a man who has not been divorced has not been successful in business. Okay. So but today what has happened is women have become effective enough at earning a living. They have entered, skill development, college. They graduate more lawyers than men do at this point, and certainly way more psychologists. And so the point of the matter is, and forget about that. The point is the world within Western democracies is way wealthier. So we have way more square footage that has been left by previous generations. In the last 75 years, there's been an incredible increase of wealth of the world. And as a result of that, a woman now can look at this situation and say, you know what? I could actually survive with some child support or not. I actually have a good enough job. We actually, between the two of us, have enough income that we could each live in our own domiciles. And I do not have to be sleeping in a bed next to this guy, and I don't have to live my life with him. I'm not into him. It's done. So this is what her Stone Age ancestor would have done 10,000 years ago, long since. So when any woman ever reaches the state where she's ready to leave a relationship, it's long past the time. So very obviously everybody's still got a little derivative cultural shockwave from 1948 when this was a disaster for the children. Okay. And then we're going to trot out modern correlational research saying, oh, well, children of divorce are just so much worse off. Yeah, it's like, yeah, that's because they're coming from more unstable parents with all kinds of financial catastrophes. So you've adulterated the data. Show me parents that are inherently just as stable, just as well off financially, just as intelligent. And then you show me children of that divorce, and I'm going to see two kids that are no worse off than their matched pairs for those genetic characteristics. Not at all. Okay. So so the point of the matter is this young lady is looking at her life and saying, I don't want to live my life with my best friend or a good friend that I'm not into at all, but that's what it is. Let's call it for what it is and let me move on to a situation where I might be able to find love and romance, which is exactly what the brain was designed by nature to seek. Okay. So no, they don't need counseling. There's no resurrecting this. This relationship has found its truth. Okay. So there are occasional rare instances where a romance lives under some brooding conflict, a betrayal, an affair. In other words, there can be times when there's still a relationship there, but we've got layers of resentment and defensiveness that are actually hampering the emergence of what could be. That is not typical. This is far more typical. So this relationship's been dead romantically. It's been dead for a long time. It is not possible to resurrect it. Legions of marital therapists will do everything under the sun to try to pretend like it can be and like that's the way it should be. They are all appallingly ignorant of human natural history. Okay? If they knew anything about human natural history, they would know that this is a farce. What you are looking at, you're looking at a species that's designed by nature generally to have sexual chemistry last for a few years, to keep the male around long enough to provision children through their most vulnerable periods of their survival. Okay? Then you're going to very typically find it waning, and you're going to find our Stone Age ancestors moving on to new relationships. This would have been a way, for example, for women not to put all of their genetic eggs in one basket, to actually have 2 or 3 different men by which they have 2 or 3 different children, so that they are essentially, if there's some genetic deficiency with respect to one male, they even it out and increase their likelihood of gene survival 500 years later down the planet by giving birth to a diversity of skill sets, or in other words, genetic strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so that is how the species is designed. This young lady is literally facing a sociocultural wave against her. And if anybody ever speaks up and says, I want out, it's dead. Holy smokes, trust me, it's dead. Okay, it's long since dead. So then the guy that is not qualifying to sleep with her, i.e. her husband, is now like, oh shit. Okay, I'm losing something that I really prize that I don't qualify for, but I really want it. It's like, well, I understand that. This is difficult, but folks, when you don't qualify, you don't qualify. Okay, that's how it works. And you're not in control over whether you qualify. If I was in control over whether I qualified, I would have had a hell of a lot more success in the romance world than I did. Okay, we are by nature out of control with respect to whether we qualify. Okay, so all you can do is you can do your best, and then when you don't qualify, face the music. Okay, this young man should not be facing the rest of his life being rejected in a relationship where he doesn't qualify. That's no way to live. Okay, and this young lady is doing him a tremendous service by facing this music. It's giving him the only chance he has to ever wind up in a situation where he qualifies, in a mutual qualifying situation where he can have a life that's more complete. Okay, so that's, obviously it's always worth a little bit of discussion, a little bit of therapy, but a lot of the marital therapy that I've seen is that people will come in and one person is totally checked out. They are basically dropping off the other person at a therapy office so that they have done their duty and they can now move on with a clear conscience. That has been, I've seen real life marital therapy with people that were both in it and they're in high conflict. I've done a lot of that, and but I know the difference. This has all of the earmarks of, yeah, I'll go to therapy, and then one session later, she's dropping him off at Dr. Schmo, and she's done. That's what it sounds like to me. That's what I think is happening there. And you should support your daughter and not be part of the push of trying to keep them together. Do not do that. That is doing her a tremendous disservice, and she's vulnerable to that kind of pressure from her family. Okay. She's like a little tiny seedling that just pushed itself up out of the ground. And she's about 2 inches tall right now. And if you roll over the top of her, you can break her stem. Don't do it. You get out of the way of that and be gently supportive. You can love both of them. You can hug her. You love the son-in-law, fine, but don't you put 1 inch or ounce or gram of pressure on your daughter to go to therapy. You really got to think this thing through. Trust me, she's thinking it through to the nth degree. You support her and you tell her you do whatever is best for you. That's what you do. Okay? And anything I can do to help you, you let me know. But I am here to support you in whatever direction you want to go. That's the right thing for a parent to do.
Wow. Dr. Lisle, Larry says, this is fascinating. You are on fire. Really, God, I just love the way you unwind problems. Dr. Lisle, is it possible that people sometimes qualify at a certain point in the relationship and then they lose the qualification?
Oh, all the time. In other words, that's classic of the species. So it's classic that you qualify for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and then you don't qualify anymore. Okay. That's how you would engineer a system in order for example, women not to wind up with all their eggs in one basket. So women are going to start having children at 18, 19 years old in Stone Age. That's what's going to happen. They're going to have a career that goes on about 20 years. Okay. Very typically, they're going to wind up with 8 children, and they're going to wind up with 8 children from multiple mates. That's how that's going to happen. Okay. So keep in mind that that's the species. That is how you were engineered. And look at this. This is absolutely, completely, and totally consistent with the behavior that you see in humanity. You see some girl has a high school boyfriend or sweetheart, and she's with him for 2 or 3, 4 years. Then that breaks up, and then 2 or 3 years later, she meets another guy, and then that kind of goes sideways. Then she meets another guy, and then that kind of goes sideways. And then at 33, she gets married, then has a couple of kids. And we're thinking, oh, that's the real relationship? What are you, blind to human natural history? What the hell do you think was happening between 18 and 33? What was happening was sexuality and romance that would have resulted in offspring. That is exactly what was happening. The fact that it didn't result in offspring is a gift of the modern ability to understand how to block that process from happening. But her psychology did not lock down on Mr. Right at 18 and then never waver. That's not what happened. Okay. What happened was serial monogamy. That is exactly what happened. And that is the design feature of the species.
I'm so happy, Dr. Lisle, because not everybody that submits questions is able to watch live, like in the case of the doctor, because obviously she's working. But that questioner is watching live, and she said, where did it go? There's so many comments, but basically she's very happy with your answer. She needed that answer, and thank you, basically.
Good. Absolutely. You bet.
And other people are saying, great discussion today, Dr. Lisle, you never disappoint. You want one more, or you want to go home?
One more. We'll go one more.
Okay. Well, I like this one because we can dedicate this to every HCNC that we both have ever known. And it's from an anonymous Aussie. Question for Dr. Lisle. I've been at my
By the way, Australians are all gorgeous.
Uh-oh, he froze, Dr. Lisle. Uh-oh. He froze. Is he frozen for you guys? Okay. Let me text him and tell him he froze. Tell me, guys, Dr. Lisle, excuse me for interrupting, but you did freeze for a moment. The last thing I heard you say is Australians are all gorgeous.
They're all gorgeous. So, and Jen Howk and I on the Living Wisdom Library, we will spin out on things like this. We have a theory. We cooked up this theory when we went to Australia a couple of years ago. The theory is that Australia was a penal colony for the British. And we think that the reason why it was a penal colony was that all the great looking men in England got rounded up and arrested. And they got, because the other goofy average guys didn't want them anywhere near their wives. And so they shipped them off to Australia. And now, a couple hundred years later, what do we have? The women are gorgeous, the men are gorgeous, the whole thing is just insane. All right, so go ahead and tell me the question from our Aussie.
Okay, thank you. All right, let me pull it up again. I've been at my ideal weight for 3 years now. I'm finding that I'm more anxious about food than when I was a junk food vegan. I never gave how much or what I ate a thought as long as it did not contain any animal ingredients. However, now I'm constantly worrying about, did I eat mushrooms today? Did I eat enough leafy greens? If I missed out on a really healthy food, for example, I went a day and didn't consume any tomatoes, I get really anxious, and I'm constantly thinking about what foods I should be eating at the next meal, not in a craving sense, but am I eating a big enough variety of healthy food every day? How can I stop worrying and obsessing about this?
Yeah, this comes from, I'm not sure exactly how to help you other than the following. What will change your mind and change your motivation, change your feelings is new information. And so the information that has assaulted your mind is the notion of deficiency. So it's very common in the hyper health world for the HCNC personality to get very nervous listening to people like Michael Greger and Joel Fuhrman, that they're going to wind up with deficiency syndromes. Okay, these guys do far more good than harm in the world, but they have a philosophical mistake that sits as an undercurrent to their thinking. These guys are both of them, and there's more people like them, but these guys are two of the brightest and most prolific in terms of writers and the most famous. They're purveyors of the concept of deficiency. This is human beings are extremely susceptible to the concept of deficiency. So probably I speculate, and I have no data for this at all, but I speculate this comes from a generalized anxiety about deficiency just with respect to getting enough to eat. So, by the way, women genetically are far more worried about nutrition than men. This would be because they would be extremely interested in feeding their children, and they would be worried about whether their children would be getting enough. Okay. It wouldn't be difficult for women after they find out, in 1927, that there are components to food. Actually, in the 1800s, we discovered protein. And so people have been worried about protein deficiency for more than 100 years. Then by the 1960s and 70s and the rise of the Rodale Press, Prevention Magazine, et cetera, pretty soon you have the rise of the vitamin pill industry, which is pounding home the notion of vitamins. As vitamins got discovered, if they discover vitamin C, and now suddenly you need 50 times more of it in a pill, because if a little bit of it is essential in the difference between you and scurvy, then 50 times more is going to make you super healthy. See how this is going to work? So it's very, very easy. Then it's going to be vitamin E, then it's going to be vitamin B's complex, then it's going to be this, then it's going to be that. It's going to be dolomite, calcium, etc. In other words, the concept of deficiency becomes the thing for a highly conscientious nervous system to wrap its head around and then triangulate on, and to make this of extraordinary importance. Okay. So the next rendition is going to be, one notch more sophisticated in the mind of a Dr. Michael Greger, who's going to be look at all of the different components of foods and all the phytochemicals. And so he's super knowledgeable about this stuff because he's a bright guy and he's super curious, and he never gets tired of investigating the differences in individual foodstuffs and their concentration with the relative different kinds of nutrients. I understand this. It's a personal intellectual fascination. However, we have to understand that we are the big problem of dietary problems is excess. It's not deficiency. Okay. So my dad was enamored with this, and he was super concerned about taking handfuls of vitamin pills and worried about everything that's in food. And finally, I got so frustrated with it that I wrote an article for Health Science Magazine called "Looking for Health in All the Wrong Places." And I tell the story of Sherlock Holmes and the case of Silver Blaze. It's all, the Sherlock Holmes solves the mystery because everybody else is confused because they're looking for health in all the wrong places. This is a beautiful moment in the extraordinary movie A Few Good Men, where the Tom Cruise character, it suddenly occurs to him that the young Marine who was killed by his comrades accidentally, that he could not have been ordered off the base because there was not, his locker was not packed up. It's a chilling moment in the movie where the very same Sherlock Holmes concept of you have to look for what you're not seeing. Okay, this is the notion. People are, it's difficult for them sometimes to see problems from the right side direction. People are not designed to look for dietary excesses because dietary excesses never happened in the natural history of the species. They're designed by nature to look for dietary deficiencies because dietary deficiencies were the #1 cause of death. So it is not difficult to understand why Rodale Press, every protein mongering nut, every vitamin purveyor, and now fancy doctors who actually have triangulated the correct direction with respect to food, that their inherent intellectual fascination is on deficiency. I understand it. It just turns out you're looking in the wrong place. The pathologies that you're seeing are being caused by dietary excesses, not by dietary deficiencies. You could have an outstanding diet of radishes, turnips, and pinto beans. You're not going to be dietarily deficient. You're going to be extremely healthy. Okay. So, John McDougall has tried to make this point over and over again. Colin Campbell will tell you, you don't even know what's in the food. There are thousands of chemicals that haven't been identified. If you identify some of them and say, well, radishes or purple blueberries have more than oranges, so they're better, Colin Campbell would roll his eyes in frustration and say, you're insane. You have no idea what's in the orange. Oh, white potatoes are just this, there's nothing in them. John McDougall says white is the combination of all colors, for goodness sakes. Okay, so we see, it's not my opinion, standing shoulder to shoulder with Colin Campbell and John McDougall, pretty damn safe place to stand, as they tell you, don't be chasing individual nutrients. Okay, the individual nutrient concentration question is a fascinating, it's like stamp collecting. It's really, really interesting. Okay, I share some of that fascination just like any normal human being would. Okay, I like listening to these guys and hearing what they have to say, but a lot of times when they get too excited about it, I start rolling my eyes. And you can really move yourself off center. Quite frankly, any natural foods diet made out of healthy food is good. And it's almost certainly, literally 100% equivalent to some other diet, to someone who has carefully orchestrated it to be, quote, high in phytochemicals. I will bet you that white potatoes, turnips, radishes, and oranges have just as many phytochemicals as anything, as kale and blueberries and anything else that you could think that you could hyperconcentrate. We just haven't discovered those phytochemicals yet. We don't know what they are. We're not going to know for 100 years. So thinking that they have been discovered and therefore you're better off with 3 tablespoons of blueberries and four leaves of kale than you would be with oranges and apples and a banana is ludicrous. There is no logic or scientific support for it. All there is the existing knowledge of the existing stamp collectors. So I can give you that. If the book you need to read to wrap your head around that is Whole by Colin Campbell. I think if you read that, there is exquisite prose in that book that Colin says he did not write. He has a marvelous co-author that I can tell the stamp. I forgot his name. He's a very interesting, very bright young man.
Dr. Howard Jacobson, perhaps?
There he is. And Howard Jacobson, has a beautiful way of turn of phrase to bring this argument. And between the two of them, with Colin's extraordinary intellect and authority on this question, and Howard Jacobson's artistry, the two of them put together, an argument for the ages. And so for this person asking this question, read Whole, and hopefully that will calm your anxiety down and give you a huge dose of humility about our ability to control and understand the interactions of what on earth we're putting in our mouth. Your job is to make it whole and make it healthy. And after that, don't worry about it.
Dr. Lisle, it is so wonderful having you on the show. Thank you so much.
My great pleasure, AJ. I hope I've helped and offended equally.
I think, well, yeah, I think you've accomplished that beautifully, but so many people are just really resonating with what you say. And, the ones that don't, well, that's why there's chocolate.
That's why we're here. If we can maybe learn something, then, maybe we're better off.
That's why there's chocolate and vanilla. But what bothers me is the ones that are disagreeing with you aren't even willing to look at the Plowman book. Why can't they just look at it and then disagree with you and have a conversation? But they're just saying, I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm not going to look at anything else.
You know what? This is just a last word here. This is paradigms are hard to shift, not only in science, but in individual minds. And this was most famously written out by the philosopher of science, Thomas Kuhn, in what's known as his book is The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. And so new radical ideas notice how extremely difficult it is to pull out of this culture the idea that you do not need animal protein. Look at that. Okay, the fact that I can point to graph after graph showing you the correlation coefficient between animal protein and cancer, it's like it doesn't matter. Pulling that out of the culture, that's a paradigm shift. It's very hard to make. So many of the ideas that I talk about are paradigm shift ideas. I'm not surprised that they meet great resistance in the human mind. Even very intelligent, even curious people have a hard time. I can't tell you how many open medical doctors who are open to nutrition. When I started talking about fasting 20 years ago, they were like, okay, now I've identified you as a nut. Like, that is not possible. There's no way you're not giving them anything and they're getting better. No, that cannot be true. Okay. Well, now after you've had a Nobel Prize for the studies of autophagy, now, and you've had some major science published, now they're starting to listen. But the point is, 20 years ago, even very bright, very capable, open people, when I would get to that was the last straw. And they're like, no, now you're over the line. So I'm never surprised, AJ, and that's just part of the game when it comes to paradigm shifts.
Wow. Well, Dr. Lisle, you got me a super chat donation, so thank you. And I grew up without animal protein or a father, and I turned out okay.
All right, AJ.
Thanks so much, Dr. Lisle. And
thanks everybody. We'll see you soon.
And
Bye.
Thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow when my guest is Rachel Brown. We'll be discussing her new book, For Fork's Sake. Take care, everyone. Have an open mind, but not so open that all your brains fall out. Take